Too late, of course, for the markets
the Dutch toll in Italy has declined for a second day as governments across Europe scramble to contain the coronavirus outbreak.
Too late for markets really to react. I mean, the pound, that's still trading in international markets, and that hasn't really reacted all that much. Most economists expected something like this was in the way, and if you look at the way the economy has been behaving, you know, a lot of people have been expecting that something like this was on the way. We've seen people shifting some of their shopping from physical shopping, so on the high streets, towards online, and obviously there have been many stories about people stockpiling as well, getting extra food into their houses at the same time. Business groups have mostly said this is obviously the right move, but let's not kind of delude ourselves. I mean, you read out that list of restrictions. This is totally unprecedented. Even during wartime, you know, there were blackouts, but there were never lockdowns quite in this way in the UK. And it really underlines that this is a major shift. We have never gone through this in the UK, anything quite like this in terms of the prevalence, in terms of the impact on the wider economy, and there will be an impact, and really that is the point business groups are making. We know this is going to affect many of us, millions of us around the country won't necessarily be able to do our jobs. It will have an enormous dent on economic growth in the UK, and the hope is it's temporary, and the hope is we can bounce back once the virus has been defeated or contained. But it's worth just bearing in mind, there is a very different debate happening on the other side of the Atlantic, where some people, including Donald Trump, have posited that the chance that actually it might be worth loosening some of the restrictions in order to try to get more economic growth. Over here in Europe, there is a consensus, certainly in the UK, when you listen to all of the business groups, when you listen to most politicians, that this is the right thing to do, whatever the economic cost. And it's right that the Treasury has put some measures in place to ensure that workers aren't necessarily left entirely out of pocket by this. There may well be more measures coming up on self-employed workers later on this week. But over in the US, there is a very different debate about whether the virus should be allowed. I wouldn't necessarily get to go so far as to say to run free, but certainly whether that whole herd immunity debate that we had for a little bit in the UK might well actually take force in the States, and the President talking about whether some of those restrictions should be loosened. It'll be interesting to hear from him in his press conference coming up relatively soon as to whether he's really going to go in that direction, a very different direction to what we're seeing here in Europe. But a striking moment, as I say, Dermot. So far, not much reaction on markets because everyone thought this was likely to happen at some point sooner rather than later, but it doesn't discount the fact this is an enormous moment for the UK, for all of society and for the economy, because many people won't be able to go to work in the way that they were hoping to. This does tighten those restrictions on how much
they are studying in England, one in Taunton.
And a bit more briefly, if you would, could you just tell me if you got any more information on the issue of people who are self-employed? Because that is one of the reasons, of course, isn't it, why people are still going to work. Of course, it's essential for them to go to work if they're not going to get paid.
It is, and, you know, for many people in many different fields, you know, they are self-employed. I mean, think about contractors, plumbers, you know, many of these workers aren't necessarily described as key workers, so they will now find themselves facing these restrictions, and there are going to be some difficult conversations and some difficult moments of realisation that they may not be able to go around their work as they had assumed they would. And at the moment, there is no special plan for the self-employed in terms of support for them. The Treasury is working on it. It's finding it quite difficult because it is difficult, they say, to track some of the work that self-employed have done in the past, to try to ensure that they are given the fair amount of support. I am expecting...
Highly honoured to have with us. Dr. Tedros will tell you more.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Margaret. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Less than 6 months ago, WHO and FIFA signed an agreement to work together to promote health through football. We didn't know then what we know now, that a new virus would emerge that would bring many parts of society to a standstill, including the beautiful game itself. Many football matches have stopped. But our collaboration has become even more important during these difficult times. In fact, it's given us the opportunity of working together more closely than we imagined with FIFA.
Post Malone is known in the music industry for breaking down genre-based barriers, not to mention his impressive collection of face tattoos. Since releasing his debut track, White Iverson, in 2015, earlier he told Rolling Stone that he was focused on resting. He said, "I needed a little break because I've been partying a little hard, so it feels good to be back home and playing Call of Duty." One fan posted a compilation video of the Goodbyes artist, both on stage and interacting with fans.
Campaign we're starting jointly called "Pass the Message to Kick Out Coronavirus." Pass the message to kick WHO ambassador.
And folks know the White House watches the show. I'm not going to say exactly who watches it and reports to the president. They'll try to fire him. You see them trying to fire these folks all the time. In the White House. And I said to Barnes, I said, give your message to the president. White House also follows his Twitter. And he said, if Trump saves us from the depression everyone else is leading us into by reversing the country's course on this, I am going to build a statue to him in my front yard, paid for by successful bets he has won for me. And Barnes won the biggest bet ever, just in Ireland alone, $300,000+ or the equivalent on betting on Trump. And of course, he was talking about the Democrats killing the rescue package and killing the package for emergency money from first responders and medical equipment while they bitch and say he hasn't raised a finger. And President Trump responded, Robert, we will end up stronger than ever before. Thank you. Here's some of what Barnes had to say.
Eager to create a global city and to punch above its weight on the world stage, Sri Lanka has reclaimed 2 square kilometres of land from the Indian Ocean to double the size of its capital. This is how Colombo is about to become one of South Asia's most formidable new centres.
Some of the people fighting against environmental destruction.
Each year, around 200,000 Sri Lankans, many of them highly skilled, leave the country in search of better employment opportunities. Since the end of the Civil War in 2009, Sri Lanka has sought to bring jobs and talent back to its capital, driving a level of economic growth that would earn it global recognition. Positioned between the powerhouses,
fascism, communism, World War II, the Cold War, and a decade of depression around the world. So those people who think you can just turn the engine of the economy back on like you just turn your car engine on, do not understand the scope and scale of what's happening economically. In addition to that, the liberties that are being lost or endangered are extraordinary. Right now, your First Amendment right of political activity is being suspended. Your First Amendment right, you can't do a public protest. You can't do public association for political purposes. You can't do religious association for religious purposes. Your Second Amendment rights are being effectively suspended. New Jersey, California, New York, Illinois, Pennsylvania, these states that are imposing shutdown orders are excluding gun shops from those orders, so that from being necessary businesses. So they're not letting them be exempt. What does that mean? It means you can't purchase a gun. And while you can't purchase a gun, we're seeing unique levels of release of prisoners. There's a judge in Montana talking about releasing prisoners. Orders out of Philadelphia, New York, California, other places. They're talking about releasing people from Rikers Island, some of the most dangerous people in New York City. So while you can't leave and you can't protect yourself by purchasing a gun, the other thing that's happening is they're basically shutting down background check departments. So one of the longtime concerns was that background checks were just a guise, both for surveillance purposes, but also ultimately to use them as a pretext to deny people access to guns. Well, you have state governments across the country in different places effectively shutting down, furloughing.
Let's stop right there. He then goes into his advice to the president in the second half of the video. It's at man.video. We just posted it 20 minutes ago. It's already got 8,000 views. So
as well as 250